Hey there, how's it going? Get up here. Out of the default races for the Eberron campaign setting in the 5th edition of Dungeons & Dragons, the Gnomes are actually one of the more alien races, since they did not originate on the world of Eberron at all. In fact, they're from an entirely different plane of existence where they reside as an easy-to-operate Linux user interface. I think I got some of my notes mixed up here. Oh, here it is. No, they actually come from the magical Fey realm of Thelanis, or Thelanis. Okay, wizards, I think it's time you drop a document on how to pronounce all of these bloody names. Gnomes come from the Fey realm, where they're part of the Eladrin's summer court, and reside mostly in the Fey Spires. Despite what tales the Gnomes may tell you, they did not become mortal upon moving to Eberron. A constant diet of fast food and tiny pastries did that. No, that's my life. I mean, the Gnomes always had the same lifespan. But due to the time differences between the Fey realm and that of the material plane, the Gnomes would appear to mortals on Eberron as having lifespans that lasted for thousands of years, when in reality, Gnomes in Thelanis have the same lifespan as those on Eberron. Sometime in ancient history, during one of the coterminous periods where Thelanis was close to Eberron and the barrier between them was thin, a large amount of Gnomes migrated to the continent of Corvair, especially in the southern portion of the continent, although many of the Gnomes have spread and traveled elsewhere since. Before we go on about the history of Gnomes, I'd like to go over the sub-races of Gnomes, as there are even more than what are available at this time in D&D 5e. On top of the Gnome sub-races mentioned in Eberron Rising from the Last War, you also have the following. Imago, or Chaos Gnomes, a very small subset of Gnomes that, unlike the lawful majority, embrace chaos in all its forms. One key factor of an Imago is that they cannot tell a lie, something that does not work well in current Gnomish society. Sverfneblin, or Deep Gnomes. These were gnomes that were taken deep beneath Eberron into Khyber when the Dale Kirsik unsuccessfully attempted to invade. These gnomes have been twisted by the horrific energies of their new environment into what they are today. The Sverfneblin have a large amount of self-loathing and consider themselves tainted and corrupted, while at the same time unable to fight against this corruption. Very rarely, you'll see a Sverfneblin actually climb out of Khyber and take up the mantle of do-gooder in an attempt to fight against their corrupted nature. Next are the Kyrago, or Ice Gnomes. These are gnomes that crossed over to Eberron in the Frostfell. Although virtually indistinguishable from their cousins in Corvair, it is said they're able to handle the cold better and have a more natural and intuitive connection to magic than the lore-based Zilargo gnomes. Then there are the Whisper Gnomes. These gnomes aren't even confirmed to exist and may just be an urban myth. It's said the Whisper Gnomes appear like regular gnomes, but are quieter and sneakier. Able to cloak themselves in a mantle of silence when needed, it's said if these gnomes do exist, they are the creation of the secret police force known as the Trust. Finally are the gnomes that stayed in Thelanis. Most of them reside in the glittering alabaster and gold face spire of Pilus Pyriel, the Gate of Joy. In fact, the gnomes of Pilus Pyriel have become the controlling faction of this particular face spire within the Summer Court. Although similar in ability to their Eberron cousins, these Fey gnomes often seem saturated in color and healthier in many ways. They use the temporal difference between Eberron and Thelanis to their advantage, knowing they can outweight those on Eberron if they need to. Using the Howling Peaks and the Seawall Mountains as a natural barrier, the gnomes took the area as their own when they arrived on Eberron and have held on to it ever since. These gnomes held a primitive and simple life for quite a long time. We know the gnomes have been here for a long time. There's brief mentions in the Decani Empire interacting with the gnomes sometime before the dwarves arrived on the continent, probably sometime between -15,000 and -12,000 YK. It's said the gnomes pushed back the kobolds of the region and then fought fiercely against the Decani Empire. They used guerrilla warfare tactics to deal with this much larger foe. The only in-game writings of the gnomes at this point are the ultra-rare codex of histories from the Decani Empire naming the gnomes as those southern jungle rats. The guerrilla tactics could only work for so long. the Dakani finally did take the area. Some of the Gnomish population was probably enslaved, while the rest retreated deeper into the deepest southern jungles. When the Dale Kier failed their invasion from the Realm of Madness and the Dakani Empire fell, the Gnomes took the power gap to reclaim their lands. They took over the cities that had arisen over the millennia from both the Dakani and the Dale Kier, cities full of lore and knowledges that the crafty Gnomes quickly absorbed. The clans still faced the threats from the kobolds of the mountains and the flickering remains of the once great Dakani Empire, so they walled themselves into great city-states of Trollenport, Karenburg, Zollenberg, and Bacon Cheddar Hamburg. Wait, ignore that last one. I think I need lunch. The Gnomes' natural wanderlust also meant they were among the earlier races to dominate sea exploration, traveling to distant locales and meeting strange new people, almost always with the goal of gaining new knowledge to add to their own. Knowledge is power, and Gnome Buddy knows this better. The Gnomes realized that their smaller numbers and weaker statures, that they were not suited to warfare. Instead, their social and intellectual skills are what give them their power. They became master diplomats, lore keepers, and bureaucrats. It is few that are as capable in the linguistic capabilities as that of the Gnomish civilization. It is said if a language has ever existed, the Gnomes will be able to translate it. So dedicated were they to the lore and knowledge, they created one of the greatest mortal libraries in existence, the Library of Korenberg, where it still stands to this day. When the human population first came to the continent, it was the Gnomes that were their guiding force in civilization and stabilization. The Gnomes took the human language of the Old Common, retooled it, and spread it among the races, creating what is known as the common language of the modern day. Around the year -1800 YK, the Gnomes were the third race to produce a dragon mark. The mark of scribing was manifested specifically among Clan Civis. The clan knew they would be set apart from the other clans, so to gain power as a solid foundation, they delved deeper into the arcane arts to master their dragon marks than any other had dared to go. This level of stable power and in-house rules would eventually go on to be the template that most other dragon-marked houses would emulate. It was around this time that factions among the humans would start to threaten the Gnomish city-states. The warlord Malian threatened them along the southern coast, while Karn the Conqueror threatened them through the north. They saw the wealth of knowledge that the Gnomes held and wanted it for their own, as well as the natural resources that the Gnomes had maintained within their borders for this long. To protect themselves, the Gnomes unified into a single nation they named Zilargo, the home of the wise, which was ruled by a triumvirate with one representative from the councils of each of the three major city-states. Shortly after this, a gnome only referred in the histories as the Proctor convinced the triumvirate that there was still a threat to the stability and knowledge of Zilargo, and that for the true control, a secret police called the Trust needed to be made. Any gnome could be part of this secret police without his family or friends even knowing, thus creating what the gnomes see as a healthy level of paranoia to protect their knowledge and laws, a practice that continues to this day. When King Galifar I unified most of the continent of Corthair into the Kingdom of Galifar, one of the kingdom's first targets was to be Zilargo. The gnomes knew what their true weapons were and surrendered immediately without a fight, but instead were ruthless at the negotiation table. They became a sovereign principality under Galifar rule, but with an amazing amount of independence. Some wonder if the gnomes really lost to Galifar at all, or if they just won on an entirely different battlefield of their choosing. Gnomish expeditions were funded, including into the Shadow Marches. It was here the gnomes found the orcs with the Mark of Finding in the year 498 YK. The orcs used the gnomes' guidance, and House Tharash was created, a house devoted to further exploration, a house that some say is still secretly controlled by the gnomes. As the centuries crawled on, the gnomes continued to develop into the science of magic. Eventually in the year 783 YK, The sending stones were created and then improved upon. Magical devices that allowed gnomes with the mark of scribing to instantly communicate with each other over vast distances. The gnomes had not only created the key communication network for the Kingdom of Galifar, but were the sole operators and controllers of any information exchanged through that network. By the end of that century, with astonishing pace, the communication network was set up among most of the major cities throughout the continent. Around this same time, the explorers and sages of Zilargo founded an expedition to rediscover the ancient magics the giants used to bind elementals into devices. The expedition was successful, and Zilargo began manufacturing airships and lightning railways. Despite theoretically still being a vassal state to the kingdom, Zilargo had a mind-bogglingly large amount of power throughout the kingdom. Information, communication, goods, exchange, travel, all of it was routed through one little southern population. Then the last war began. The Kingdom of Galifar began to splinter. Dispute over the next ruler fractured the kingdom, and war broke out in a way that had never been seen before. This wasn't just the brutal but efficient warfare like the Dakani. Advancements had been made during this time. Constructed soldiers, battleships in the air, instant communication to the front lines, quick supplies to the soldiers via rail. This was a new and scary type of warfare. Initially, Zilargo remained neutral in the conflict. They profited off each nation equally. Since Zilargo largely maintained and controlled much of the communication and transportation production, it was sort of an unwritten rule that the splintered sects left Zilargo relatively untouched. The few times someone did attack or offend the gnomes, they felt quick revenge as all information and services from the gnomes would suddenly cease. As the war raged and things were coming to a tipping point, the gnomes finally consolidated and sided with their northern neighbor of Breland. Breland, being possibly the largest merchant center, as well as one of the larger suppliers of food, meant that with Zilargo as their ally, they were able to make up in resources when they sometimes lacked in troops or firepower. Then the end of the last war happened. The mourning ended the nation of Kyrie, and the Treaty of Thronehold was established, where Zilargo was one of the now independent nations to sign it. To this day, Zilargo is one of the nations on Corvair that has been the least affected by war, and has only become increasingly stronger with time. Well, I hope you learned a little bit about gnomes in this video. There's a lot more to talk about them, but I'll get into that in the future in a follow-up video, but I did want to get the basics down for you to know. So, stay safe, stay healthy, and have a good one, eh?
Well, hey there. If you want to check out more content from me or even see some live gaming action, check out my links to the Twitter, Twitch, Discord, and YouTube below, eh? Also, if you're a content creator looking for help with like graphics and things, you know, like animated alerts and stinger transitions, well, check out the links to sign up for your chance for me to help you out for free. I've done this stuff professionally for years, and to date I've helped out a lot of streamers and content creators with, you know, like overlays, logos, basically anything they need. What's the catch? Well, I mean, there is none. I give out these services for free, but stream the progress and make a community around it. In turn, this sort of gets me recognition, subs, and donations. Yeah, it's kind of a win-win, eh? So check it out and maybe you can get some help from your new Canuck buddy. Have a good one, eh?